Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know if Kickstarter is launching this week. Before we get started, I do want to go over a couple updates that I discovered over the past week that I think you might find interesting. The first one is that we have a new launch date for the game Bloodstone, which was launched a few months ago, but it got cancelled. I know this is one a lot of us were looking forward to, and this is actually going to be moved to the summer or fall of 2022. So we still got just under a year before we see that back on Kickstarter. The next update is that Star Wars will be getting a new role-playing game, which I thought was pretty interesting. I don't really have any info on this. I don't know if it's coming to Kickstarter or not, but if you want to play a role in the Star Wars universe, that's something that you can look forward to in the future. And the last thing I wanted to cover, and this is the most important one, and that's that the team over at OneStopCoopShop is doing a fundraiser campaign to raise funds for Children's Miracle Network hospitals. OneStopCoopShop puts out a ton of great content. I especially like their playthroughs, but they also do a few reviews and first impressions, as well as a few other videos as well. And the way that this fundraiser is going to work is that they're going to be playing and live streaming a ton of different games, and you'll be able to watch those on YouTube, but you'll also be able to get involved in the chat and get involved with their actual play sessions in a few creative ways. And there's a couple ways that you can donate. You can either donate through the chat during the live streams, or you can check out the link on their video here. I really appreciate the extra work they're doing here and making something like this possible, and I think they're definitely a channel that you want to subscribe to if you haven't already. And I'll leave a link to that right up here so you can learn more about this fundraising campaign. And if you're able to donate, you can go ahead and do that right now, and all you have to do is scroll to this link underneath their video, and then there'll be a handy donate page, and all you have to do is click that donate button and select an amount that you are able to donate. And I'll lead by example and leave a little donation here myself. So, ye old shelf o collector. And although that was just a few clicks and a bit of cash, this can actually make quite a bit of a difference for those children at these different hospitals. But not only that, I think the efforts here is something that should be encouraged. So a small donation of whatever you can afford is also a great way to show your support for One Stop Co-op Shop and the extra work that they're doing here. And then one very last thing before we get started, and that's that we're getting near the end of the month, and at the end of every month, Alex over at Board Game Co. is going to release a video going over all the campaigns launching in the next 30 days. So if you want to get a little bit of a head start on the games that are to come, definitely go ahead and check out his channel. He also has a ton of content. He puts out a video every day. The guy's a machine. And he also puts out videos every week covering Kickstarters from the perspective of their value proposition, which is really helpful info when trying to decide which campaigns you want to back and if they make sense from a cost perspective. And with all that said, let's check out the Kickstarters. Launching on October 25th, we have Marvel Dice Throne, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And this one is going to be our Discord pick of the week. And this is a standalone expansion to the game Dice Throne, but it's also completely compatible with all the previous Dice Throne content. So that means you can mix and match these new characters with characters from Season 1 and 2, as well as the Dice Throne Adventures game. And just like with every other Dice Throne, the rules for this one is going to be the same, and you're going to be able to choose a hero from a variety of heroes that each have their own asymmetrical hero board and leaflet, which outlines their abilities and their ultimate attacks. And for each character, players will also get a health tracker, a combat points tracker, a deck of cards, and 5 dice. And on a player's turn, they'll draw 1 card from their deck, and then they'll also gain 1 combat point. And combat points are kind of like a currency that allow you to play certain cards throughout the game. And the active player can play as many actions as they want in any order, and there's 3 actions that a player can perform. The first one is to discard any of their cards in order to gain some combat points, or they can pay the cost to play a hero upgrade card that they currently have in their hand. And the way that those work is that each upgrade is going to match an ability on your player board, and if you pay the cost for that upgrade, then you're going to replace that ability on your player board by putting your new card on top of it. So these upgrades will augment the abilities that you already have. And the third action is that you can play any amount of action cards, and to do that you just pay the cost and then perform the action. And then you're going to roll your 5 dice, and you can re-roll any amount of your dice up to 2 times. And then you can play any one of your offensive abilities. But each of these abilities also have requirements, and in order to play any of these abilities, you would have had to roll the appropriate dice in order to fulfill that requirement. So this might mean that you need certain icons or a certain sequence of numbers. If you're just playing a 2-player game, then you're just simply attacking your opponent player, but if there's any more than 2 players, then you're going to roll a die to determine your target. Some dice rolls dictate the player that you have to attack, while other dice rolls might give the option up to the players. This different colored ability in the bottom right is actually your defense ability, and if you're ever attacked, you can try and defend against that attack. Although some attacks can't be defended against, and you're also going to have to roll your dice in order to fulfill the requirements of that ability. Once you've completed your attack, you can perform any of those 3 actions I mentioned before as much as you like once again, and this is going to allow you to brace yourself for the next player's turns. This is a really great looking game, and there's already a ton of characters released, but obviously this new version is going to be focusing more on Marvel characters, and if you want to learn more about the characters that you might see as well as their abilities, definitely go ahead and check out Man vs. Meeple, because they are providing some exclusive info on the new characters and divulging a little bit of their special abilities and their play styles. And as always, if you want to stay up to date with this campaign and get notified on launch, I have links to all these campaign pages in the description below. Also launching on October 25th, we have Catapult Castle, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 minutes to play. And this is a dexterity game that has some pretty interesting components. There are a ton of towers that players are going to be using to build up their castle, and then they're also going to be using a miniature catapult and a shared pool of boulders that players are going to be launching at each other's castles. Each player is going to be starting the game by taking one of these land boards and setting up a few of these towers on the different squares on this board to set up their castle. And they're also going to be taking a deck of cards which represents their characters and the characters' abilities. The different land boards interconnect, so they're going to be in the center of the table, and then players are going to be launching different boulders at their opponent's castles. And players will take turns doing this, but if you miss, you end your turn. But if you land the boulder inside of your opponent's tower, then you're going to be taking that tower for yourself and adding it to your castle. If all 4 spaces on your map are already filled, then you're going to be taking one of these cards, placing it in the top of one of these towers, and then stacking the next tower on top of that tower. Anytime that your tower gets shot at, you get to draw another card from your deck into your hand, giving you some more special abilities. And any boulders that land inside of a tower stay there for the entirety of the game, because once all the boulders run out, that triggers the end of the game. And these cards have some really fun special abilities. They allow you to shoot multiple boulders on your turn, or they allow you to throw boulders with your hand rather than using the catapult. Or they can also do things like this one here with the reinforced roof, where you're going to place it on top of one of your towers, and it essentially acts as a free hit for one of your towers. So if a boulder ever hits a tower with that card on it, it's going to absorb that hit and prevent the boulder from going inside the tower. Really simple game to learn and teach, which is great for kids, and the player that has the most tower pieces on their board by the time all the boulders runs out wins the game. And then launching on October 26th, we have AngerSmash, and this is a party game for 2 to 5 players. It takes about 20 to 60 minutes to play, and in order to win the game, you're going to be trying to do some set collection. And this is a campaign that I thought was launching a few weeks ago, so I've already covered it, and I'll leave a link to that video right up here. Also on the 26th, we have The Hand of Destiny, and this is a solo game that takes about 10 to 20 minutes to play, and it's played entirely in your hand, so you don't need a table or anything in order to play this game. All you need is the deck of cards, and you're going to be going up against different bosses and trying to make your way through the deck to come out on top. And this is another game that I've already covered, and spoiler alert, it's one that I'm really interested in, so I'll leave a link to that previous video right up here. Launching on October 26th, we have Resident Evil the board game, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative dungeon crawler game where if any player dies, everyone loses, so you're going to want everyone to survive in order to win this game. And you might think that this game will play similar to Zombicide, but I think it actually plays quite a bit different. This one is a scenario-based campaign game, and players are going to be setting up a portion of the map at the start of the game, and then they're going to be choosing a character, each with their own special abilities and different weapons that they might start the game with. The game takes place in Spencer's Mansion from the original Resident Evil game, and players are going to be exploring that mansion and discovering more of the modular board as they open doors and enter into some of these other rooms and areas that the game has to offer. And players are going to be taking turns, and on their turn they can perform 4 different actions. They can move their character menu across the different tiles on the board, or they can open different doors to explore new areas of the map, or they can pick up some different items that they might find along the way. And there's actually 3 different types of items, with the first level of items being your more common ones, while the others are more rare, unique, and powerful. Players can also choose to spend actions in order to run past enemies or use their weapons, and in order to use a weapon, players are going to be rolling some different dice, and then depending on the weapon that they're using and where they are relative to the enemy on the map, the dice roll is going to determine whether or not they hit and for how much damage they hit that enemy for. I really like the way that enemies work in this game because there's not actually a turn for them like there is in Zombicide. Instead, they're going to activate based on the player's actions throughout the game. So if you go ahead and attack an enemy and you miss, it's going to trigger that enemy to perform their action, which is going to be either to move closer to you or to attack you if they are in range. Each enemy also has its own card outlining its range, damage, health, and any special effects it has. And there's also going to be some big bosses that players will encounter throughout the game. After a player completes their actions, it does also trigger a reaction phase where if there's any enemies that can hear or see you, they're either going to move closer to you or they're going to attack you if they are in range. But it is possible that no enemies get triggered at all if players are playing cautiously and closing those doors behind them. And then at the very end of a player's turn, they're also going to be drawing a tension card, and these kind of act as random events throughout the game. And these come in 3 different colors. There's the green card, which is a safe card where nothing really is going to happen and it just moves on to the next player's turn. But then there's the orange cards, which are going to present some more challenging obstacles for the players and potentially give the enemies some extra activations or put more corpses out into the different rooms. And then there's the red cards, which are more aggressive, which can trigger different things like zombies crashing through windows or doors and putting you in more direct danger. After these cards are resolved, it moves on to the next player, and play continues like this back and forth until either the players have lost the game or have completed their objectives for the given scenario. Players are going to also run into some more powerful enemies as well as bosses, and this campaign is also going to offer 2 main gameplay expansions, each with 2 big bosses included. And the first one is going to be for the guardhouse, which introduces Plant 42, which is the giant tentacle plant, and then Neptune, which is the flesh-eating shark. And the second expansion is going to introduce the caves and the 3rd floor of the mansion, and it's going to include the big bosses, Yan, which is a giant snake, and the Black Tiger, which is, you guessed it, a giant spider. And also launching on October 26th is Beast of Gévaudan, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is actually launching on Game on Tabletop. It's not going to Kickstarter or GameFound. And this is more of a soft launch print and play to gauge the interest. And if this gets enough attention, the designer will want to turn it into a physical game. And in this game, players are taking on the role of different hunters, competing to become the most famous and influential. And at the end of the game, the player with the most influence tokens is going to win the game. The catch here is that influence tokens can be earned, lost, but also spent because they double as your currency. And every game is going to have a randomly generated beast that is terrorizing the town and players are going to be trying to defeat. But at the same time, nobody really knows the true nature of the beast, but there are rumors. And the official record is going to represent the current popular expectation of that beast. Each player is going to be representing either nobility, the church, the locals, or the press, and each one of those is going to have their own loyalties and agenda of what they want the official record to represent. So if you're nobility, you're going to gain more influence if the people believe that the beast is an exotic foreign creature, but if you are representing the church, you're going to gain more influence if the people believe that the beast is a supernatural being sent from God. But if you're representing the locals, you're going to gain more points if people believe that the beast is a natural entity like a dog or a wolf. And then finally, if you are representing the press, you're going to gain more influence if people believe that the beast is a hoax. And the true nature of the beast is going to be determined by shuffling some different beast ID cards and then randomly inserting 4 of them into 4 different envelopes. These will remain in secret until the end of the game. And the game plays over 7 rounds, and each round has 5 phases. The first phase is the bid phase, where players bid for play order. And then during the second phase, players can put their characters out on different action spaces out on the map, depending on player order. Each location grants some different unique bonuses that players are going to be competing for. During the next phase, players can draw encounter cards, and these allow players to manipulate the official record of the beast to their favor, but they can also cause some other effects throughout the game to help you along the way. Players that find themselves in the more dangerous locations can embark in a hunt, and there's a different threat each round that players can hunt, and doing so will allow players to bolster their hunting party and gain some new weapons to help them later on in the game. And then during the 5th phase, players will gain influence based on how they perform during that round, and players will also be allowed to trade items with each other. During the final round, the hunt phase is replaced with a final confrontation with the main beast, and the true nature of that beast will be revealed. This will be a tougher battle, and players will want to be prepared for it because certain abilities and weapons will be more effective against certain types of beasts. Certain abilities and actions throughout the game would have allowed players to peek at the different envelopes, divulging a little bit of information to them so that they can be more prepared. At this point, players can choose to either fight against the beast or attempt to flee to safety. The player with the most influence, once all this is said and done, wins the game. And launching on October 26th, we have Kinghill, and this plays 1 to 2 players and takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is really interesting because it takes a unique approach on a 2-player card battler by integrating worker placement with upgradable worker tokens. And in this game, players are going to be competing for dominance by recruiting and deploying different units, as well as learning and casting different spells. Players will be managing their own player boards, but they'll also be able to send their workers out into the main board in order to gather different resources and perform some different actions, or they can also choose to upgrade those workers into some specialized units. The different specialist workers are represented by these little tokens here, and there are a ton of different ones to choose from, and some are better at certain actions than others, and come with some unique actions or bonuses, and can affect some other aspects of the game. Another way you'll want to spend your gold is to hire units in order to strengthen your army, and these different units will have different strengths, defense, as well as abilities and chaining effects. Or if you'd like to go less hands-on, you can instead spend your time learning some different spells, which will grant you some different action cards, which you can use at particular moments to change the tides of the war. And then finally, you can use your most powerful attacks, which are your Moonstone powers. And these are powerful abilities that grow in strength over time. And using these powers can cause some collateral damage because they can transform and destroy the landscape of the game, forcing both players to adapt in some different ways. The longer you play, the more of these Moonstone tiles get activated, causing more danger and volatility for both the players to contend with. The first player to get their opponent's endurance down to 0 wins the game. Also on October 26th, we have Megapulse, and this plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this is a futuristic racing game inspired by titles like Wipeout, F-Zero, and Mario Kart. And in this game, each player starts with a hand of 7 action cards, and then each round players are going to choose 2 of those cards and then reveal them all simultaneously. Players can then take turns using their chosen cards. While doing this, players will be accumulating speed, drifting, using their nitrous, launching bombs and missiles, and using their special abilities. Players will want to take advantage of different upgrades to their vehicles as well as boosts out on the track while avoiding different obstacles. Some more powerful cards will come at a cost of having to discard other cards in your hand, and the first player to cross the finish line wins the game. Launching on October 26th, we have Damnation, the Gothic game, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 30 to 60 minutes to play. And this is a battle royale horror board game where the last survivor is the winner. And in this game, players are going to be choosing their villain to play as, and there is an assortment of characters to choose from, each with a passive ability and 3 one-time use abilities that can be recharged throughout the game. Players are going to be rolling to move in order to explore the different areas of Dracula's castle, but there's going to be lots of options to choose from as you move about the board because there's going to be multiple paths to go down as well as secret doors and large rooms that connect the different paths along the board. There's also a special die that's going to be rolled along with your movement dice, and depending on the icon that you roll, it can help or hinder you on your turn. So it can have some special effects like allowing you to draw an event card or enabling you to have some more flexibility with your roll by adding or removing from your total roll value, or it might just make navigating the board much more difficult by automatically triggering any traps that you come across. Each room in this game has its own deck of cards that's available to the player that's currently visiting that room. And these cards can be powerful attack or defense cards, as well as some special action cards that allow you to perform some rule-breaking abilities. And then there's also some random event cards mixed in, and when you draw one of those, you simply follow the instructions of the card. Players will want to try and use all of these cards to survive while trying to avoid traps, vampires, ghosts, and the wrath of the other players. Each time a player is killed, two things are going to happen. They're no longer going to be able to win the game, so they're going to flip their board over to the backside, and that's going to have a list of actions that they can perform as they haunt the castle. On their turn, they'll be able to choose one of these actions to perform to try and make navigating the castle more difficult for the other players, speeding up the game. The second thing is that one of these rule cards will get flipped, adding a brutal rule to the game, making the game much more deadly, also causing the game to end sooner. And there's one more very special aspect to this game, and that's that the first player to enter the vampire's chamber can actually get bit and become the vampire. And what this means is that it's going to completely change the game for that player as well as the other players. But for that player, they're going to disregard their existing player board and they're going to trade it in for the vampire's player board. And this will make you immortal, and you'll also be able to feed on the other players. The catch with this is that you can only have so many turns out on the board before you have to return to your chamber. If you're not able to do that, then you're eliminated from the game. The last player left alive or undead wins the game. Launching on October 26th, we have Power Plants, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 25 to 60 minutes to play. And in this game, players are wizards competing for the best plots of land in a shared garden. Something that I think you'll really like about this game is that it uses these really cool tiles to represent the different plots of the garden. And another really cool thing about these tiles is that there are a ton of different plant tiles to choose from, but only 5 actually get used in a single game. So you're going to have a lot of different permutations and a lot of variety from game to game. To select those 5 tiles, you're going to be drawing or choosing 5 cards at the start of the game, and each card is going to be associated with a certain tile. These 5 cards are going to be put out on the table for all players to see, and then the matching tiles are all going to be put into a bag that players are going to be drawing from throughout the game. At the start of the game, players are each going to draw 2 tiles from the bag, and then on your turn, you're going to choose one of those tiles to add to the shared garden, which is represented by the group of tiles that players have put out on the board. Whenever you put a tile out on the board, you're going to choose if you want to activate its sprout power or its grow power. The sprout power is more powerful, but it only activates the tile that you just put out, while the grow power is not quite as powerful, but it activates all the tiles that tile is touching. As players put more tiles out onto the board and activate the different powers, the garden's going to generate gems, and the gems represent victory points in this game. Players can gain those gems through the use of different powers, but they can also deploy different sprite workers onto the different patches of the garden in order to gain control of those different areas and gain the gems that those areas contain. At the end of your turn, you're going to draw a new tile from the bag to replace the one that you just played, and it moves on to the next player. The game ends once the draw bag is completely emptied of tiles, and then players tally up their points by adding up their claimed gems, and then adding up any additional gems for areas that they control out on the garden. And the way that players determine that is by determining who has the majority on any connected group of matching tiles, and then any gems there go towards that player. The player with the most points at the end of the game wins the game. Also launching on October 26th, we have Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory, and this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 90 to 180 minutes to play. And this is a really interesting, asymmetric, political, economic, card-driven nation simulation game. And in this game, players are going to be acting as different classes within that nation, either playing as the working class, the middle class, the capitalist class, or the state itself. The working class is going to control the workers, but they need to work for companies, earning income for basic needs and entertainment, but they can also apply a lot of pressure through unions to assert their influence. The capitalist class controls the companies, and they're going to be selling goods and services and dealing with foreign states, and their main goal is to maximize their profit for their shareholders. And then the middle class is going to be combining elements from both the working class and the capitalist class. It has workers who can work for the capitalist companies, but it can also build small startup companies of its own as well. The player playing as the state is going to want to try and keep everyone happy, so its goal is to have the needs of all the other groups taken care of, and then it's also going to be trying to maintain a steady income through taxes to avoid going into debt. Although players have their own separate goals, all players are still going to be governed by the same set of policies that are going to affect most of their actions throughout the game. And players are going to be voting on the policies that govern the rules of the game, but they're also going to be using their influence to try and manipulate them to their favor. This game's main mechanisms are resource and hand management, as well as voting, variable player powers, and action selection. This game also has negotiation that opens up multiple ways to win, where players can choose to play more cooperatively or competitively. And launching on October 26th, we have Hanamikoji, Geisha's Road, and this plays 2 players and takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play. And this is not an expansion to the game Hanamikoji, it's actually its own standalone game in the series, but this campaign will be offering an expansion that will work for both of these games, which I'll get to shortly. But this game does have quite a few similarities to its predecessor, so I think it's worth explaining how to play Hanamikoji so you can get a better understanding of this game. And both of these will be offered in the campaign, so you might want to know both of them anyway. And in the original Hanamikoji, players are competing to recruit geishas to their side. There's 7 geisha cards that get put face up in the middle of the table, and then there's a deck of 21 cards that will get dealt out to each of the players each round. And although it's not visible in this image, each geisha will also have a token on it, and if the token is in the center of the card, it means that neither player has recruited that geisha. And what players will want to do is try to move that token to their side of the card, indicating that that geisha has been recruited to their side. Each geisha card has a number as well as a color associated with it, and this tells you how many cards of each color are in that deck of 21 cards. The number also represents the prestige of each individual geisha. Each player is going to have 4 one-time use action tokens, and on their turn they're going to draw 1 card from the top of the deck, and then they're going to take 1 of these actions. The different actions are to keep a card of your choice in secret, or to discard 2 cards of your choice in secret, or you can show 3 cards to your opponent, they get to choose 1 and you get to keep 2, or you can split 4 cards into 2 piles, show them to your opponent and they get to choose 1 to keep and you keep the other. Once each player has used all of their tokens, the end of the round is triggered, and players are going to go through each geisha one by one and determine which player has the majority of cards matching that geisha, and then you're going to move the token to that player's side. The interesting aspect here is that if players tie, then that geisha stays recruited with whoever was recruited in the previous round. So if that geisha was already on your side, then she stays on your side. There's 2 win conditions to this game. Either you recruited 4 out of the 7 geishas, or the geishas that you recruited have a total prestige of over 11. If both of these conditions are met, then the 11 prestige takes priority. And that's pretty much all there is to know in order to play Hanamikoji, and I guess now is probably a good time to mention that this one is also my pick of the week. And it might seem like this is a pretty simple game for being my pick of the week, but this game is actually no joke, and there's nothing wrong with simple games. And I think a more accurate word for this game would be elegant. You might not have noticed, but each round you're actually only using about half the cards, which means that there's quite a lot of different permutations with the cards that actually come into play. And each round's going to be playing very differently than the last. And players are going to be trying to play their actions the best that they can with their limited info, while trying to determine which cards their opponent is trying to go for. Back when I used to have free time, I liked to spend that time designing board games, and whenever I was deciding to add or remove something from a game, I always considered how much fun did it add to the game, and what is the cost in terms of time or complexity that it also adds to the game. And the more and more I look into this game, the more it seems to be checking off those boxes for me for presenting some really fun decisions and having a lot of depth, but then at the same time being really easy to teach and then quick to set up and play. So this looks like a really solid game, and you don't even need to take my word for it, because this little game is actually ranked in nearly the top 200 on Board Game Geek. Like I said, this one is no joke. At first I wasn't a huge fan of the theme on this one personally, and that was kind of holding it back for me, but in the amount of time I spent researching this game, it's kind of grown on me, and I think it's kind of neat that the elegance of the game is also matched with the very elegant theme. Geisha's Road definitely took some inspiration from Hanamikoji because there are a lot of similarities between these 2 games, but I do think the differences are substantial enough that this will add a unique spin on a game that many people already know and love. The game has a similar setup, but rather than 7 cards, it's going to have 5 in the center of the board, and then players are still going to be dealt 6 cards and have 4 different action tiles. And for the most part, the turn sequence plays nearly identical, except for in Geisha's Road, there's a completely new module added to the game. This game's going to have a set of tea house cards put out into a circle, and anytime a card is played, the geisha matching that card moves clockwise equal to the number on that card. If a geisha ever moves back to its same colored tea house, then you're going to add a lantern card to that tea house, indicating that it's worth 3 points. And this is how prestige is measured in this version of the game. Up to 2 of these lantern cards can be put on each tea house, meaning that each one could be worth up to 6 points or 6 prestige. Whichever player has that Geisha recruited at the end of the round gains that prestige, and the player with the most prestige wins the round. The first player to win 2 out of 3 rounds wins the game. There's also a little mini expansion that comes with the box where players can collect different guest tokens and use set collection to gain some additional points. And I did mention at the start that there will be an expansion for the original game, but it also works for Geisha's Road as well. And this expansion is going to come in the form of 7 boxes shaped like Omamore, which is a type of trinket that's supposed to help you with good fortune in different areas of your life. But each of these boxes is going to offer a different set of action tiles, and these action tiles work with both versions of the game. And it's going to add quite a lot of variety to your games, because now instead of just the same 4 tiles, you're going to have 7 different options to play with. Once again, here's an example of something that's really simple but adding a ton of depth to your game. So if this one interests you, don't forget that you can click to get notified, and you can find links to all these campaigns in the description below. And next on October 26th, we have Batman Escape from Arkham Asylum, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 30 minutes to play. And this is a semi-cooperative game where players are playing as the villains. Players are going to be trying to devise a plan, avoid the guards, trigger alarms, make split-second decisions, betray their friends, and escape Arkham Asylum before Batman arrives. And this is described as a dungeon crawler where the main villains are the Joker, Harley Quinn, Two-Face, the Penguin, Bane, Poison Ivy, and the Scarecrow. At the start of the game, players will draw a plan card, and that's going to define the conditions of the map. So it's going to dictate the number of rooms and corridors that must be placed, and the special effects and scenario-specific surprises that go along with that plan card. Players will build the map from the modular tiles and hexagons, which represent the rooms and corridors, and each player will also draw an event card at the start of the game, and that's going to set some unexpected situations that the players have to address throughout their adventure. Players will have to join forces to achieve their common goal of escaping the asylum, but they're also going to have their own hidden objectives that may put players at odds with their escape and might cause some seemingly irrational decisions, or perhaps completely pit them against the other players. And each round is going to have 2 phases. There's the player phase and the adversary phase. And during the player phase, players will draw another event card, and then they're going to take turns performing different actions to move around the board, search different rooms, craft crazy weapons and tools to help aid them in their escape. And some of these will be more difficult to complete than others, requiring multiple characters to complete. Players can attack guards and other enemies as well as some different bosses, but any bad decisions will raise the alert level, and if that reaches its maximum alert, then Batman's going to come and pay you a visit, attacking the most successful villain. Each character and boss will also have its own character card with its own special abilities. When all the players have performed their actions, the event cards that they took at the beginning of the game will develop some random events, normally negative ones, and they will have to overcome those circumstances in order to win the game. And then we have the adversaries phase, and this is a really interesting phase because players are going to change their roles and play as their own adversaries. This is going to allow the players to have some control over their enemies, and you might have to attack some of your own team, but there'll also be some opportunities to mislead wardens and guards to help aid you in your escape. Battle in this game is resolved using dice rolling, and there's 3 different types of dice that can be found throughout the game. And those different types of dice are going to range in their effectiveness and the amount of risk you have when rolling them. The game ends once all players have either been defeated or have escaped the asylum, but escaping isn't quite enough to win the game because you're also going to have to gain enough infamy points. And now on October 27th, we have Monster Mayhem, and this plays 4 to 12 players and takes about 20 to 40 minutes to play. And this is a party game where players are tough and scary monsters, but players are out to find out who is the tough and scariest of them all. In this game, players are going to be navigating through a variety of room tiles, each with their own terror to challenge the players. So you might see things like crushing walls, spike pits, pools of acid, ravenous beasts, or a giant toilet. Each player has a vote token, and there's going to be 8 locations randomly chosen for each game. In each round, the topmost location is going to be red and will present a decision to the players. Each decision will have either a yes or no, a left or right, or a stay or go option, and players are going to be using their vote token to determine which option they want to choose individually. So for example, this location card might turn up with 2 executioners, and players are going to have to decide if they want to rush the left executioner or the right executioner. Players are going to be deciding individually, but depending on the results of the vote, it's going to dictate what happens to each player. So for this one, if you went with the majority, you gain 2 points, but if you didn't, then you lose a point. Unless the minority vote was just one monster, then that monster sneaks by and gains 5 points and all the other players lose 1 point. So depending on the results of the vote, players may gain or lose points, and they're going to have to adjust their score accordingly. And after 8 location tiles, the player with the most points wins the game. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, and that's actually all I have for you this week. This is normally the part of the video where I would announce some giveaways, usually multiple giveaways. And I thought this was actually going to be a big week because I have over 10 giveaways in the queue, but for whatever reason, a lot of these campaigns are struggling to fund this month, and I always wait until campaigns fund before announcing those giveaways to avoid any awkward situations. But we have another 10 giveaways added to the queue this week, which means we have over 20 giveaways in the queue, so stay tuned for some giveaways in the future. But if you still want to say something nice and hang out in the comments, I'll be sure to say hello. But for now, let's go ahead and draw the winner for last week's giveaway. And this giveaway was for Zoo King. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here, and all these extra names down here are bonus entries from my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and want to help out the channel, definitely go ahead and check that out, and I'll get you some bonus entries into these giveaways for the weeks that we actually have giveaways, which is 99% of the time. So I just grabbed those comments from the video, and let's go ahead and draw a winner. And the winner is Taco Pizza Bob. Congratulations on the win. I'll reach out to you and let you know you won yourself a pledge for Zoo King. And that is all I have for you this week. Until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.